we greet you in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Here in Santa Rosa, our group, the Commandment Keepers for Christ's Kingdom, will continue again with the studies today of the 7 churches of Revelation 2 and Revelation 3. Today we will be advancing on to the next church, the 5th church of the 7 churches, the Church of Sardis. So we've covered 4 other churches, and maybe we'll quickly review these, what we've learned about the 4 churches, so that we can see how the 5th church, Sardis, come into the picture. Revelation 1, Jesus is telling John that what he is going to reveal to him will help these churches see what is to come. What has not happened yet, this will help them foresee the future. It is the testimony of Jesus Christ himself. And we also find in chapter 1 that Christ is seen walking amongst the 7 candlesticks. And the 7 candlesticks represent the 7 churches that we are studying now. And the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches. And we found out that the angels means a messenger, so it could be referring to the preachers or the teachers of these 7 churches. And the first letter to the Church of Ephesus, one thing that we know that it's stressed in every church that was John had to write to, Christ is saying that he knows their works, their labor. And for the Church of Ephesus, that was what Christ said to them. For the Church of Ephesus, verse 4 says, I have somewhat against thee. Thou hast left thy first love. And we found out what that first love is, their love for God and their love for one another within the church. What did he expect from all? To love their fellow human beings, fellow humans. Matthew chapter 22, verse 37 to 40, verse 40 says, of these two, the love for God and for love for human beings, hang all the laws and all the prophets. Those 2. First part of the commandment, the first 4, the love for God, and the second 6 is your love for your fellow human being. Out of those 2 commandments hang all the laws and the prophets. He also credited the first church of Ephesus for not following the teachings of the Nicolaitans. And we found out that the Nicolaitans are Christians. They've accepted the teachings of Christ. But what did they do? They neglected some of the commandments. So everything is coming back to the commandments. 2 commandments in particular that was highlighted by this writer, Irenaeus. One was fornication, and the other was idolatry. So those, even though the church was running, these 2 sins was prevalent in that church of Ephesus. The second church of Smyrna, or Smyrna, Jesus found nothing wrong with this church. They were a very clean church, but he warned them against the Jews, and he warned this church about these people who are commandment keepers, but they do not have the testimony of Jesus Christ. They reject Jesus Christ as the Messiah. And for that, they did not like the disciples and other Christians, the early Christians, for preaching about Jesus Christ. So he warned them about the Jews. And here he defined blasphemy. Blasphemy, we know, is you're a human being and you claim to be God. And Jesus was doing that. He was forgiving sins. And the Jews knew that according to the Bible, only God can forgive sin. Jesus, being God, was doing that, and he was trying to tell them, I am also God. We learned this morning that Christ himself is God. He left his godly seat up in heaven to come and live as a man. So he was still God. So they were accusing him of blasphemy. But Jesus is saying, those Jews who are of the synagogue of Satan are blaspheming. And what did he mean by blaspheming? They were claiming to be of God, but they rejected him as Christ, as the Messiah. Third church of Pergamos. This church was right there in Satan's seat. He said, I know thy works. Thou dwellest even where Satan's seat is. So, with time, in the concept of time, the first church was the first 100 years, from 31 AD to 100 AD, right after John died in around about 100 AD. Then the second church of Smyrna was from 100 AD to 313 AD, when pagan festivals were introduced into Christianity. The third church of Pergamos, it says here, you dwell in even where Satan's seat is. The third church represents 313 AD to 538 AD. And we know during that time, 538 AD was the start of the Roman Church. The power, the Bishop of Rome was handed by Emperor Justinian, I think, the power of the state given to him. So he controlled both the church and the state. That's why this church was sitting right there in Satan's seat, where this power came into play. Fourth church is the church of Thyatira. Verse 19 says, I know thy works, and charity and service, and faith and thy patience. So this church was very influential in its work for the church, for God. It was also credited for its the work that they put in for God's work. But he said one thing about this church. Verse 20 says, I have a few things against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel, and we know Jezebel in the Old Testament, which calleth herself a prophetess, to teach and to seduce my servants, to commit fornication and to eat things sacrificed unto idols. So this woman Jezebel and her teaching was very well accepted in this church of Thyatira. And we've studied about what happened during that time. During Jezebel's time, it was Elijah, was the prophet, was sent to try and revive the nation of Israel, the northern kingdom. And he thought he was the only one. But unknown to him, God told him, no, you're not the only one who has kept his faith. There are other 7,000 And where are they? They are hiding out in the caves. They are hiding. They did that to preserve their faith in God. So that the influence of the state, remember, now the church and the state are together. The influence of the state and the influence of the church will not touch them because they are out, hiding out in the wilderness. So those are the different areas that we've talked about: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, and Sardis. Oh, Thyatira started from 538 when the Roman bishop was given the state power as well, to 1570. 1570, so that's about 1,000 years. And that 1,000 years is well documented in Daniel, where it says that the beast was, what was the word used in Daniel? The sanctuary was, I've forgotten the actual word they used in Daniel, was down pressed by the Church of Rome. So by this time, by the 1570 AD, the whole of the Christian world was in total darkness, because 1,000 years was the rule. So the only people who were keeping the truth about God were out hiding in and we can know in history, talks about the Waldenses, the Huguenots, and those other people who preserved their faith in God by running away into the countries. So Sardis begins a new era. 1570 AD to what time? So we know that in the early 1500s, Martin Luther came out and he challenged the Church of Rome. All of the teachings of Rome, he got hold of the Bible, of the true Bible. The Bible itself was changed by the Roman Church. So he got hold of it, and then he studied it and he saw that what the Roman Church was teaching was completely different from what the Bible was saying. So he began to challenge the Church of Rome, and culminating in nailing 1995 thesis on the church door at Wittenberg in Germany. And there began the Reformation. From 1517 AD was when he did that, and then began the Reformation in the whole of Europe. One thing that we found in all these four churches, including the fifth one, Jesus was saying, I know thy works. It's very important to remember that all these five churches, Jesus recognized their works. And someone who wrote a lot about works is James. I'll just bring in a few of the verses that are very clear. It says in James 2:14, what doth it profit, my brethren, though a man says that he hath faith and have not works? Can faith save him? He's asking that question. In verse 17 he says, even so, faith, if it hath not works, is dead, being alone. Faith alone is dead. Verse 18 says, yeah, a man may say, thou hast faith and I have works. Show me thy faith without thy works, and I will show thee my faith by my works. So, your faith is seen by other people by the work you do. That's the only way, because you cannot, no one can read anybody else's mind, but he can see what you're doing, and your faith stands out from what you do. The last verse says, see thou how faith wrought with his works, and by works was faith made perfect. Your faith will only be made perfect through the work that you do. It's the fruit of your faith that is seen by the people around you. Let's have a look at the letter to the Sardis, the church that we are studying today. Let's read verse 1, chapter 3, verse 1, 2, 3.
And
Unto the angel of the church in Sardis write, these things saith he that hath the seven spirits of God, and the 7 stars. I know thy works, that thou hast a name, that thou livest, and art dead. Verse 2, be watchful, and strengthen the things which remain, that are ready to die, for I have not found thy works perfect before God. Remember, therefore, how thou hast received and heard, hold fast and repent. If therefore thou shalt not watch, I will come on thee as a thief, and thou shalt not know what hour I will come upon thee. And last verse, thou hast a few names even in Sardis, which have not defiled their garments, and they shall walk with me in mine. So this is what Christ is telling John on the island of Patmos to write about to the church of Sardis. I know thy works. We just talked about the works. But it says here, you are alive, but are dead. Well, first of all, Christ introduced himself as he that hath the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars.
Amen.
We know that the 7 stars, the 7 angels, the angels are messengers. It's regarding the 7 churches. So the 7 spirits of God is regarding the 7 churches. Different eras, different spirit that came out in those, that was shown by the different churches during those different times. But all this is under the control of Christ. He's saying, right there, that he that hath the Spirit of God and has the 7 star in his hands, and that is Christ. He's speaking now. And he's saying, I know thy works. I know thy works. Without, in Bible commentary, the 7th volume says, with God, outward show weighs nothing. The outward form of religion without the love of God in the soul are utterly worthless. That's something we should be considering in our Christian life. Sometimes we do things for, our works is important, but sometimes we overdo it so that people may think that we are being warned here of that. God sees the heart. In TM 352 says here, the problem is solved, considering the works. The person here described have had light that would have prompted them to altogether different works. If they had followed the light and had strengthened the things that remained that were ready to die, the light which was glowing in their own hearts when Jesus spoke to their souls. So we are talking about the church of Sardis. It says that you have a name, you are alive, but thou art dead. So we have come to so much light. We know about what Christ is telling us because we study the scriptures. But we should not be like the church of Sardis. They have the knowledge, but they were not working or making use of that knowledge through the works that they were doing. So the works that Christ was aware about in this church of Sardis was a negative one. He said, I know thy works. And they did not have much to present in terms of their works. Unlike the other churches which Christ recognized their good works and credited them for that. Jameson works, we've already gone through that. Revelation 3 verse 2, it says, be watchful and strengthen the things that remain. that are ready to die, for I have not found thy works perfect before God. This is what Jesus is telling this church in Sardis. You remember what those things you've been taught. The old doctrines. Remember those. Strengthen it so that you may be, it may reflect in your works. I have not found thy works perfect before God. So that's something very negative that Jesus had to tell John to write to the church of Sardis about. Your works was all no good. It does not bring you anything. So this is a working church. They were working, but their work was all negative. Verse 3 says, remember therefore how thou hast received and heard, and hold fast and repent. So remember those teachings. Remember this church of Sardis came in the year 1570 onwards, during the Reformation. So when Martin Luther brought his church out of the Catholic Church, he taught them about those 95 theses that went against the Church of Rome. So they were knowledgeable about this. But did they do anything about it? No, not according to what Christ was telling John to write to the church of Sardis about. They slept on all this knowledge. They slept on it. Read what YRP 235 paragraph 4 says. Those who seek to remove the old landmarks are not holding fast, that they are not remembering how they have received and heard. Those who try to bring in theories. Received and heard. Those who try to bring in theories that would remove the pillars of our faith concerning the sanctuary or concerning personality of God and of Christ are working as blind men. So Christ is warning this church. There are people who will come in that will shake your faith because they'll remove all those pillars that your faith has been built up upon. These people are working as blind men. They are seeking to bring in uncertainties and to set the people of God adrift without an anchor. So that's what God is warning this church of Sardis about. And we are being warned too, that we should be very careful about what we hear, what we, let's be like the people of Berea. The people of Berea. Everything that they hear, they go back and check in the Bible. Those who claim to be identified with the message that God has given us should be keen, clear, should have keen, clear spiritual perception. So when we know what God has taught us through His prophecies, we should have a clear thing of what the doctrines are about. When we hear something that is not true, we should identify it. You should be able to distinguish between truth and error. So this is what has happened to this church of Sardis. This is what happened during that era of time from 1570, right after the Reformation. The church, even though was really enlivened by what Martin Luther and the other reformers did, they slept on this truth. So for a while, this truth was not moving. After the death of Martin Luther, there was the church became very stagnant and did not move forward. That's why Christ was telling John, write to the church of Sardis and tell them, you are alive, you have a name, but thou art dead. So the different errors again, Thyatira from 538 to the beginning of Reformation in the 1500s. Sardis, beginning of the Reformation to about 1790 AD. So during that time, about a 200-year period, was when the church was very stagnant. They were comfortable with the new doctrines that Martin Luther came up with. And they were happy, they were talking about it, but it did not reflect in their works. Christ told them, your works is nothing for me to be proud of, to present before my Father. And I hope that that same message is not repeated to us, church, that he is not proud of our works. So, let's be warned about that. But, however, during that dark period of time, it says, there are few names in Sardis. Right after Martin Luther's protest out of Catholicism, the fire of reform died down. The new church was content with its present truth. The present truth of that time. Whatever those 95 theses that Martin Luther pinned up on the walls of the church in Wittenberg, they were happy about that. And that's where they started. They were stuck. They became stagnant with that new information. And they never strived for further light from God. That was only the beginning. God wanted that to continue. There was so much light. Remember, over 1,000 years was when the Roman Catholic Church was downtrodden. That was the word used in Daniel. Downtrodden the truth of the sanctuary. The whole truth. After 1,000 years, nobody even knew about the Sabbath, except for those who were hiding in the hills, the Huguenots and the Waldenses. No one knew about the truth then. But it says here, a few names. Even in that darkened church of Sardis, few people are still holding on to that truth. However, few names kept the light going towards the end of this era and can be credited for the continuation of the Reformation that was started by Martin Luther. These are some names that's recorded in history. Paul, Gerhard, look at the years that John Frederick, Handel, that's a famous name, eh? Handel, the Messiah. He lived during that time. And he composed that song during this darkened period of the Messiah. Johann Sebastian Bach, Johannes Bengel, George Fox, Philip Jacob Spencer. These names, you just put them into Google and they'll come out and you'll read about what each of these people did. Ending up with John Wesley out there in England. Even though the Sardis church was likened to a walking dead, the light was kept burning through people who stood up for the little truths that they come across despite persecution and hardship. So, during this darkened age, these people stood up for the truth. And assisted in that message reaching us today. Revelation chapter 3 verse 5 says, he that overcometh, the same shall be clothed in white raiment, and I will not blot out his name out of the book of life, but I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. Great Controversy verses page 483, first paragraph says, as the books of records are opened in the judgment, the lives of all who have believed on Jesus comes into review before God. So nothing that we do that works is known by God. Because it's been saying, I know thy works. Beginning with those who first lived upon the earth, Adam and Eve, our advocates, presents the case of each successive generation and closes in with the living, for us who are living today. Every name is mentioned, every case is closely investigated. Names are accepted, names rejected. When any have sins remaining upon the books of record, unrepented of, and unforgiven, their names will be blotted out. That's what Jesus is saying there. Their names will be blotted out, and the record of their good deeds will be erased. All the good deeds are recorded up there in heaven. Amen. But if you have unrepentant sins, unforgiven, your name and all that good works will be blotted out from those books in heaven. The Lord declared to Moses, whosoever hath sinned against me, him will I blot out of my book. That's found in Exodus 32 and 33. And he says to the prophet Ezekiel, when the righteous turn away from his righteousness and committeth iniquity, all his righteousness that he hath done shall not be met. What a waste. Amen. All of our hard work that we are being commanded as a church will go to waste if we are left with unrepentant sins and unforgiven sins. Can you imagine the pain? Who did the verse say that will blot out the name, your name? It was Christ himself. He said, I will blot out your name. Can you imagine the pain that Christ will go through when he will personally blot your name out from that book of life? He was the one who sacrificed his own life so that your name can be seen in that book. He is the one, he is the same one who will have this very difficult task of blotting your name out because you have defiled your white garment with sins. What pain he will have to go through. So this same person who has come to this earth to die for you and me, and has assured you when you were first received him in your life that your name is written in that book of life. But now at the very end, after judgment, when he finds unrepentant sin, he's telling the church of Pergamos, I will have that very difficult task of blotting your name out. Together with all your good works, it will be erased from that book. Because that book that will remain in heaven will have no records of all sinfulness, of all unrighteousness. No wonder Christ is so worried about us, because he doesn't want to be the person who will go and blot your name out. Let us pray.